Formula 4, hosted by Joshua Schall, is a podcast that unpacks the early stories of consumer packaged goods entrepreneurs to reveal the list of ingredients that ultimately led them to the revered products they built. This was a previously unreleased podcast interview that I did with Brendan Ahern, the CEO and co-founder of Ronnie Coleman's Signature Series. This podcast was recorded on July 17th, 2018, and because of that, you'll hear some dates and timelines that might sound a little bit odd. This was a extremely candid and insightful interview that gets you in the mind of Brendan. So I hope you guys enjoy this episode of Formula 4. What kind of drew you to entrepreneurship? Out of all the things you could have done, what kind of started you down that path? I mean, was it something at the start of childhood? Did you know like early on this was going to be really what you wanted to do with your life, or was it something that you kind of stumbled into?
Well, I mean, I think everybody has a story. I mean, you know, like literally every single human being in this world has a story, and some are, you know, tragic, and they're all unique to us, right? And so I think in general, you know, I've always looked at my story to kind of like fuel my fire to do the things that I wanted to do and to achieve the things that I wanted to achieve. So, you know, starting from my childhood, I was a, you know, third generation Irish Boston guy. So we came from a real gritty family. My grandfather was like a janitor his entire career. My dad was like a flight attendant. You know, I grew up in a 1,000 square foot home, you know, sleeping in a bed with my three sisters, you know, until I was like 9 years old. So like we didn't really have a tremendous amount. I didn't grow up with like a tremendous amount. But I did have like a very unique, I think, scenario that taught me a lot about business and that really drove me. You know, my dad was always really good about trying to, you know, teach me the value of earning a dollar, like, you know, the importance of it and why it's important to save and all this stuff. I mean, to the point where, you know, as you brought me on the show, I said I have to bring like a piece of evidence to like the fact that my first job was literally at 6 years old, and this was a gift that my
So those that are listening to this on like an iTunes or something, you guys can't see this, but if you guys check out the YouTube channel, Brendan brought in like a shoe shine kit from when he was...
Yeah, so you can see it says, to my BC, happy 6th birthday, you know, love Dad. So my gift on my 6th birthday was a shoe shining kit so that so he could drop me off at the store so I could shine shoes for 50 cents. That was like my first real like job, but it was instilling the value, you know, of like earning a dollar, and that was like, you know, that was something that he put in me.
Yeah, and that's a lot different. I mean, I think for most of us that, you know, can consider ourselves entrepreneurs, like we all have those kind of stories. Like most of us are probably like lemonade stands or whatever. Obviously, like yours is a little bit different. Like you were literally shining shoes at a supermarket. Your dad was just like dumps you in the middle of like a bunch of people and says, hey kid, let's see what you're worth.
Oh, and I loved it. You know, I really enjoyed, you know, earning money from a young age, you know, and that kind of like carried on throughout my life, because like doing that, and then when I was like 12 years old, I used to do like the seasonal jobs. Like I'd go to the pumpkin farm and be like, hey, do you need somebody to like carry the pumpkins for your customers and stuff? And, you know, I'd get tip money. Or the Christmas tree, I would have like Christmas tree huts, and I'd be like, oh, let me like, you know, help you out with like the Christmas trees. Let me help you carry it to the car and stuff. And I would get tips and do stuff like that. And then by the time I was 14, I would like pretty much take any job whatsoever. You know? And I had some pretty crazy like jobs that were awful. I mean, one of my you know, claims of fame was like I was literally like the Chuck E. Cheese character one time. That was like the only job I ever quit in my life. I was a Chuck E. Cheese character, having little kids like kick me and scratch me and stuff. So that was like the only job that I actually literally quit. But that's like how far my career stretched. I did anything and everything as long as it was something that was going to, you know, provide me a paycheck, you know.
Not to jump too like forward, but do you think, I mean, a lot of, I think the trend now with the youth is like they don't work when they're young and when they're teenagers. They kind of wait, because I think colleges, they're looking for like a certain amount of you having volunteer hours, and they want you to learn 6 languages, and they want you to do all these things. Like we have the benefit of kind of like looking at things from hindsight. Like, do you believe that, you know, taking those quote unquote kind of like crappy jobs are integral to like just success as an adult?
I mean, like it again, because it's everybody has their own story. It wasn't a choice for me, right? Like I needed to like kind of do my own thing at a certain age if I wanted certain things, if I wanted to, you know, have those things that I had to earn it. And, you know, as you know, like my nephew is you met him last night. We went out to dinner, and he's 17 years old, and this is his first job. You know, I'm like flabbergasted. Like, you're 17 years old. I had like 30 jobs by the time I was 17 years old. But, you know, he's here, and it's not like it's almost like a cooler thing for him. Like, oh, cool, like I have a job. You know, this is really neat, you know, versus like, you know, taking it at a serious level. I think that kids, they have more options. You know, they have people telling them it's okay to not do that, to focus on school. Yeah. This is where I want you to do. And then, you know, conversely, though, I think that the real world experience of having a job is the reason why a lot of them come out of college and they're not able to pay off their debt so quick, because they like don't have the real world experience. Because it's like, doing your own thing's great, but life is about doing shit that you don't want to do. A lot of it is like 80% of it is things you don't want to do, but you have to do, you know. And so, you know, I think that, you know, there is some, in some situations you're missing out on, you know, the realness of it. But look, what are you going to say? If you're a kid and you don't have to work, and you're like, your parents are like, just go to school and like have fun, what are you going to do? I mean, you're not going to, you know, I think it's about what path the parents really genuinely lead them down, to be honest with you.
So to jump back into, I mean, I think we left off kind of in your, you know, teenage years of having crappy jobs. I mean, from, I guess, like a parenting side, was there anything like in that age, like time frame, that things shifted in terms of like, hey, I need to make $1 over, like, there's another way to do this. Like, I don't need to be taking these crappy jobs. Like, there's something farther aspirationally for me to reach for.
Yeah, sure. So, you know, step back around like 9-10 years old, my parents went through like a really nasty divorce. At the time, my dad was not, you know, I would consider like in his career. He was just a flight attendant or some lower level management at, you know, Eastern Airlines. And the divorce was nasty. He lost his job, and he had to basically start from scratch. And, you know, sparing the details between my parents, you know, my dad left with a fire in his ass. You know, he was so driven after that point. So I'm a kid that actually now I can like see for myself, like he is trying to grow. He's restarting. He's got a new career. He's starting it, and he's taking it dead serious. So, you know, I watched him kind of, I don't know, just reboot his whole life, you know, and I got to see what hard work did. And I saw over the years, you know, 9, 10, 11, all of a sudden it's nicer houses, nicer condos, nicer cars. He's living on the beach, and like he's like building stuff. And I got to witness him start to take on projects. Like, he was brought in as like a guy that builds a company, and then they sell, and he kind of like takes on the next project. So he had this like, you know, entrepreneur mindset. He'll always be an entrepreneur in my mind. He'll always tell you he's the best B player in the world. You know, we talked about the B player status of not being the guy that starts it, but the guy that builds it. And I got to witness that, and it was really cool. And I think I think that makes me very unique to me, because I got to see it firsthand, and I really appreciated the grind, and I saw the reward, and I saw him balance his family while doing it too. So I think I had a really good example of, wow, like this is pretty cool. Like you can do a lot as long as you put your mind to it, and as long as you're really kind of going to work your ass off, to be honest with you.
Sure. I mean, just kind of, I think there's obviously a lot of power that goes with just kind of being able to view it from, you know, the sidelines, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Like kind of seeing it, and you like, you kind of in a way get a little bit of a taste of it. I guess like to take it a tiny bit further, like did you also kind of start asking your dad a lot of questions in that time? Like just kind of like, hey, what's going on? What are you doing now? Like, you know, just kind of like being more of like a student of like just, I guess, what his life was becoming.
Yeah, because, you know, he was so excited, right? Because this is like first, you know, my dad is a late bloomer, right? So he's experiencing this stuff firsthand, and I'm like seeing the excitement when he comes home and is like, oh my God, we just went public, or like, and this happened, and like, and so I'm like, what does public mean? You know, like, I go to a public school, you know, so, you know, I got to see his excitement, and so there's a lot there. But I mean, even more, Josh, which I didn't get to talk about, but my mom ended up marrying an extremely wealthy guy. He owned at the time, the company's $400 million in revenue. Wow. This is a big a commercial airline company. Okay. It's just huge. And as my dad was growing, I watched him lose his company literally overnight. He had a $30+ million lawsuit he lost, and it was like within minutes, you know, the houses, the boats, the cars, all this stuff, you know. So I went from this extreme, like kind of like borderline poverty, I think middle class would be a stretch, you know, to my mom marrying this guy who had a bunch of money, to my dad being poor but also growing at the same time. So I watched my dad escalate, and then I watched an empire collapse.
Yeah.
Overnight. And I was like, I thought that was a big learning lesson too, because I'm like, there's a lot of shit going on in a very short period of time in my life. But I witnessed that, like, the concept of like, what you have today is not guaranteed tomorrow, which is why I'm always very cautious about, like, be humble, have humility with the things that you achieve, because like you just really never know what's going to happen. And as hard as my dad worked to achieve all these great things, I saw something crumble like overnight. So it was very a learning experience,
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, kind of going into that, I mean, obviously through the high school years, kind of seeing all this kind of stuff, and then, going into college, you went to University of Florida, and you studied what at college?
Yeah, so I was in advertising, marketing,
and that was driven kind of like, I want to be in business, because it's kind of around, seeing what your dad was doing, but just kind of hey, I don't know exactly like what discipline.
I'm going to be honest on your show, just because I feel like it's the only way people are going to really get anything out of this. So I really wanted to do business, and I just fucking couldn't figure it out. Like, it was really hard for me. Like, I went from, school in Miami to this, somehow weaseled my way into the best school in Florida. Got surprised that I got accepted. And when I got there, I just didn't really have a good idea of how to study and how to I had to learn the process of studying all this stuff. So like my first 2 years, like I was like, oh, I'm going to be business. And I was like, I'm not getting the grades to stay in the business school, and they made sure to let me know. So I ended up getting and trying to stay as close as possible to, the business class, which ended up being like advertising, it's like, it's a portion of it. I was always been a creative mind, so I like the concept and idea of advertising, which is awesome, because you study advertising before like the internet's really developing advertising. It's completely irrelevant at this point in time. It's like, I know how to run ads and a media flight plan with ads and TV. It's like they never even mentioned the internet at that point in time.
It's funny, like in that now you think about it, going to college in the early to mid 2000s, you were kind of at that point, like Facebook, social media, all that was just coming out, and it wasn't geared towards commerce. It was very much like innocent social networking. Like I tell people stories. I was on Facebook, kind of in the first year that they had it, and they went as far as putting down like what dorm you could list, like what dorm you lived in or which college apartments you lived in. Like, think about that, like back how innocent it was back then. Nowadays, like, it's don't put any information on the internet. Don't do anything. Like, you were openly putting all this information on there because it was a networking tool, or whatever you want to consider it. Back then, it was like
studying. You were supposed to like connect to help study.
It was great. But I mean, like, think about business school. I mean, it was at such a point where, like, advertising, marketing, whatever, like whatever your professors were teaching you at that time became increasingly, like, in the next couple of years, was like completely irrelevant.
Dude, they used to talk about the white, like, yellow pages, and like, oh, this is what, like, I mean, it's gotten to the point where everything that I learned is like almost completely irrelevant. I mean, at that time, as you're right, Facebook was only open to universities. Like, it wasn't even open to like general public. It was like, if you were in a big school, it's extended to you, and that was that. And like advertising on the internet, that wasn't even like a big thing then. It was so they never mentioned it. It was like, something that never even came up.
So, jumping, obviously college, you snuck by, as you said.
Oh, yeah. I snuck by. I continued the grind. I got into fraternity because it was like, it included food and housing, and it was cheap. And then I was like the dishwasher guy, so like I washed the rich kids. I always talk about the rich kids. There were the kids that their parents could afford to paying for the whole thing. Well, at that time, my dad could afford it, and that's when I learned a lesson. Is like, just because I could afford it doesn't mean I'm going to pay for it. He would assist when if I really needed it. But I was washing the dishes at the house and bartending. I was just continuously kind of just doing my hustle, and I don't think that would have ever really changed. I just really enjoyed just kind of hustling and making money. That was just like a fun thing for me.
So after college, what was your first job?
I worked at BSN. So that came about, really interesting and big life lesson. I always tell people, and that's why I think that, you're going to do exceptionally well with this, because you're doing something you love again. And so that's kind of how my career developed at BSN. I was my third interview at Raymond James, the investment banking company or whatever. And, I remember going on the interview and leaving and just being like completely terrified. I'm like, this is now real life, and I'm going to hate like every minute of my life going to this job Monday through Friday. And I was just like panicking. And I remember being with my girlfriend and talking at the time, who's my wife now, and just being like, I got to figure out doing something I love, you know? And she's like, well, what do you love? I'm like, well, I'm like a gym rat and doing like local shows and all this little stuff. But I was like, I can't be a bodybuilder. Like that isn't going to make sense. And then I thought to myself, well, I have marketing. And like, I remember seeing like advertisements of like, maybe I can like make ads, or maybe I can like, you know, manage some of these athletes so that they do the proper, you know, that the integrated marketing campaigns are done properly by the athletes. If like, for example, if Ronnie goes to Olympia, is he wearing the right clothing? Is he representing the brand that he's, you know, sponsored by properly? And so I got this, like, you know, I got that idea. I was like, okay, so you went to school, plugged that in with something you love that, you know, you didn't really think about, because bodybuilding seems to be like a one-way path. And I reached out to them, and they were like, you know, it was a great interview. And I got the job, and the boss at the time was funny. I was like the only person that ever negotiated a higher salary in the history of the company. The old CEO, he's still a great friend of mine, the founder of the company. And he always tells me, he's like, I was like blown away that like someone came into my office, a manager, and was like, this kid is asking for more money right out of the gate, you know?
And that's a good lesson for people to, I honestly, I tell so many people to negotiate. Though it might not turn out well in your first time, and in your case, it did work out well, but for the most part, like, it's something that you need to learn, because the older you get, the more successful you become over how well you can negotiate things.
You got to get comfortable with it. It's going to happen, and it's going to happen throughout your life. And initially, like most humans, that's like not a comfortable thing. Like I don't, you know, buying a car, all these other various things you're going to go through. Yeah, it's going to require that.
Just so people have a little bit of understanding that don't know much about BSN at the time. When were they founded?
Yeah, so they were founded in 2001.
Okay.
You know, I don't know exact month, but they were in 2001, and you know, this time was it was 2005 that I came on board. They were definitely on an upswing. You know, I don't try to make any claim to fame there. When I got there, the company was still very, very much small and family oriented. It was like a really small building, and you know, there wasn't even a kitchen in the building. It was like really, really tiny, but like you could tell, like It'll Explode had picked up some pretty massive momentum at that point in time. Syntha 6 was just about to be launched. And they were really just like the cool brand, you know. So I was really happy that I was able to get a job with like a cool brand like that. But you know what came after me joining, I never would imagine a million years. I mean, it was like, I want to say the annual revenue at the time was between $14 and $20 million, and like the next year was like 40, then like 120, then like 150. It was like the most aggressive growth. Really that a company that you can go through. And in that time period, you know, I started at the very bottom of the barrel. I was just working as like a customer service manager when I got in there, and in a 5-year career, I had 7 different positions, you know. Yeah. And I had, you know, again, earned the respect and trust of the owner, and he really took to mentoring me and teaching me as much as he could. His name was Chris Ferguson. And I got along with the other owner too. He was a head of you know, he ran all the sales of Scott James, and he's a great entrepreneur as well. But yeah, I mean, I was very fortunate that, like, you know, it's kind of, you know, luck, you know, fortunate, right? Because lucky is like you step on a lottery ticket and you got $1 million. Yeah. Fortunate is like certain things present themselves and you take advantage of it, or you've done the right things to put yourself in a position to which those things play out pretty damn nice for you. And you know, I was put into a hyperinflationary growth period at a company that needed young, hungry guys, and I worked my ass off. I traveled the world. You know, my position, one of the biggest positions there, obviously, that ties into what I do now, is I traveled the world with Ronnie, you know, and I was Ronnie's guy. You know, we went everywhere. I made sure that all of the appearances internationally and all the advertisements, all the athlete contracts, negotiated all his contracts. I did everything for all the athletes, you know, from 2007 to 2011, I would say. I handled all the athletes, all the endorsement agreements. I negotiated and did myself. Yeah. So
and obviously you guys heard in the intro. I mean, Ronnie, who he's referring to, is actually the namesake of the brand that he now owns, operates, and runs, Ronnie Coleman Signature Series. But back then, Ronnie was just a bodybuilder winning the most prestigious awards in the world, the Mr. Olympia. So, right. You know, the time frame that you're talking about, I think, is kind of important to talk about, just because I think, it was the, quote unquote, the Great Recession. But, BSN was one of those companies that really was growing throughout that you really didn't get a sense of like what was really happening, because for nutritional supplement CPG, you had, just kind of the first quote unquote cool brand was, EAS. EAS kind of was slowing down, and Abbott Laboratories bought them right when BSN kind of took the reins. And then my story into all this is that, the reins kind of got passed over to a company called Muscle Farm, that I worked for. But, during that time in 2007, 8, 9, 10 or whatever, when, the economy was really struggling, what you found out was like nutritional supplement CPG, the growth of the industry was still surging because there was a lot of different factors, and maybe you guys talked about them or not at the company, but, with healthcare costs rising and people having less disposable income, people were looking for like different ways to get healthy. And with the obesity epidemic and a lot of things kind of macro sense happening, nutritional supplement CPG companies actually were positioned extremely well to grow. And the company that was growing maybe the fastest in the time frame was BSN. I mean, did you guys have a sense of that when you guys were there, or was it just kind of like, hey, we're trying to do anything we can to keep the growth alive? Or?
Dude, it was like we were living in another world. Yeah. It was like a bubble. I mean, I was 22 years old at the end of 2007 when I bought my first house. It was like there was no shortage of money whatsoever. I mean, the owners moved into a $25 million building. The only issue and the only shortage that there was product. We couldn't fill it enough. And I think a lot of it was international growth, right? So, our own domestic, issues they're always delayed, or like other countries don't really feel, when we go through a recession, it doesn't really hit the world until later. It's kind of like a ripple effect on the ocean, right? So you have this like ripple effect, and it takes several years, and it did. It eventually ended up hitting the U, but during that time, there was just, every imaginable arm of revenue was just on fire. Sure. So there was just absolutely no slowing down at all.
One of the biggest things that happened at BSN to me, I think, was during that phase, and you mentioned the product a little bit, NO Explode, was right at the time when the thing called pre-workout came out. You know what I mean? I think until that point, there really wasn't anything that was like, there was here and there, but like nobody really marketed it super heavy towards like, you need to take this pre-workout. And NO Explode to me, I mean, this is maybe me dating myself a little bit, was like, that was to me the first pre-workout that I took in college. That was it.
Yeah, and that's what the the owner, the formulator, Chris Ferguson, like I vaguely remember like things maybe being out there, but not really. It was like if it was out there, it didn't have that like genre pre-workout, right? So but the claim to that is that he pioneered that category, brand new category that came up that now 1 and 2 with proteins. It's like that's how big the category is.
During that time, I mean, you've mentioned Ronnie's name a few times kind of casually, but obviously now looking back, I mean, that was a big kind of moment in your life. I mean, obviously you had access to a lot of the athletes. I mean, and BSN during that time, they were really heavy in a lot of different athletics, not only what most people probably think of as, bodybuilding. They were the official supplement sponsors of the UFC. Yep. So that was when UFC was kind of in their extreme hypergrowth phase. Yep. So you had access to like a lot of athletes. What made you get along with Ronnie, or what, was there a point that you said, hey, could be somebody that I could work with in the future, or like, did it just naturally happen, or?
It was definitely more of an organic thing, like I couldn't predict that BSN was going to sell when they sold, and there's a lot of, things that I think kind of formed the ultimate decision to make that leap. I just traveled so much with Ronnie. We were really like kind of family on the road, and he, I always liked his personality. Like Ronnie's like the hardest worker ever, right? So like this guy, I knew that he like appreciated the hustle. Sure. And I knew that he wasn't scared of work, And it was also, so you have that like, okay, I know that, in the back of my head that we'd make good partners. I have strengths that he would consider weaknesses for himself, and vice versa. And then, he obviously at towards that end too. So he lost the Mr. Olympia, right? So his reign, of Olympia came to a halt. And then BSN got purchased by a massive, company, Glanbia, as you know. And I think that, the mindset of that company, of Glanbia, when they bought BSN, was they wanted to take it in a different direction. And I don't think Ronnie was ever going to be a part. And I know that he wasn't ever, being in there, that he wasn't going to be a part of their long-term strategy, right? And so, you have this, for Ronnie, I think his, decision to kind of move on, I think it was a mutual decision between BSN and him, but at the time, but was like, okay, I'm declining in pay, I'm declining in what they would perceive popularity, like how much longer is this going to go, or do I just cut it off by the neck here and go attempt to do something myself?
Sure.
And he's always been a guy that's kind of dabbled in different business ventures. A lot of them, haven't worked out, unfortunately. Some of them have done okay. But, when he left, I was like in a similar position. I knew that I was in a spot of imposition when Glanbia came in, because I'm like this fast working dynamic guy, and then he came in and was like kind of like, hey, you need to slow down. And I'm like, dude, I make decisions. I go up to the owner and I put stuff on his desk and he signs off on this. Yeah. And now I'm like, you need to kind of like slow down, and I'm dynamic. I'm passionate and say, I say swear words and stuff. So that's not usually like accepted well in like meetings. So I felt like one of the biggest learning experiences and the best things that you could do for yourself to be successful is to understand how big of a role your environment plays in you being the best version of yourself.
Sure.
And so at that point in time, I felt like the environment wasn't suited for like who I was to be the best that I could be. And I realized that really quickly. I'm like, okay, $1 billion company now. Now I see the difference. Now I see like the element. I'm not that guy. I'm the guy that works for, that 0 to 200 million, that needs to have that personal connection with the owners, and needs to be able to have, his ideas thrown against the wall and answered yes or no right away. The red tape is not my thing, right?
Sure.
And so that I recognized that. Ronnie recognized his position almost at the same time, and I remember when we left, I said, like, I'm going to help you, because I was really deep with a lot of athletes, professional athletes, and I started to do like managing sponsorship deals for like, whether it was a basketball player or this or that, I would get them like one-off sponsorship deals. Sure. Like they have their agents, and then they have guys that bring, things to the table, like, oh, I got you a Puma deal or this or that or whatever. And that's one of the bigger things I started to do. And then one of the things was, I'm like, I'm going to help you, Ronnie. Like, I'm going to make you figure out where you're not going to be like the guy that falls off the map. You're still super popular. Let's talk about what the next steps are for you.
I mean, you and Ronnie, kind of came to the same kind of conclusion, but I mean, in putting yourself in Ronnie's kind of shoes, he's at kind of the pinnacle, like you said, I mean, kind of just lost, but still like he's at the height of the sport. I mean, right. Him and Jay Cutler are kind of the guys, and there's brands out there, maybe like a Muscle Tech or something that could obviously give Ronnie, a huge.
Yeah, and they did. They offered him contracts.
So it's one of those things where in Ronnie's position, in bodybuilders, is if anybody knows, I mean, they don't. Though he was the top dog and he makes a good amount of money, still it's not like you're making NBA money, you're not making NFL money, you're not making Major League Baseball money. So, if somebody's pushing or trying to, sign you for $250,000 or this or that, like, it's kind of hard for somebody like Ronnie to look at, a young kid and say, I want to go with him and start something. I mean, like, how were those conversations? How did that happen? Just because, I mean, I'm putting myself in Ronnie's shoes and I'm thinking to myself, like, he took a lot of risk just kind of, going in that route with you to starting a business over, going with a proven kind of brand and just being a spokesperson.
Right. I mean, I think you're 100% correct. I mean, there's a gigantic balls on his part to do that, but at the same time, I think that Ronnie was around me so much that he saw what I was capable of, and he knew the relationships that we both developed together with a lot of these people. And Ronnie had the intimate knowledge of knowing that, like, I was being mentored by the old owner of BSN, the best. I mean, I was under his wing. Like, did I know everything? No, of the business? Absolutely not. But, like, I think we both came to the conclusion at one point or another that, you know, had he even signed with Muscle Tech, that was a short-term thing that's buying a year. You have to be honest with yourself and say, well, if I sign with Muscle Tech and then do my thing myself afterwards, how's that watering down my own brand image, right? So you have this brand image that you have to protect. And Ronnie at that time, you know, he was at the best of the best, and if he left and went to somebody else, kind of, you know, hopping stones there, I think it would have watered down the magnitude of him coming out and doing his own thing, because at that point in time, like, yeah, he had maybe a sponsorship with Netflix before BSN, but nobody really remembers, right? Sure. Like, so it was like Ronnie was like this guy that was with BSN a long time. He had his career built, you know, was like a BSN thing, even though it was at the end of his career. But he was known as being branded by that company. And I think that, you know, like BSN and like any other company, he realized that, you know, if he was going to build any sort of long-term wealth, that it was going to require, you know, that moment at that point in time to doing that.
And this is 2011 when you guys started?
It was like the end of 2011 when we first had products. I mean, so, you know, between like October, I guess, I think I actually had like hard, you know, tangible in my hand product.
And when you were starting this out, did you guys ever have any other names for the brand at first, or was it always going to be Ronnie Coleman's
No,
products?
I always thought it was, you know, I always was steadfast on the fact that his name was so big that it had to be that way. You know, it points in hindsight, it depends, you know, like in the US, it's like, oh, probably would have did better if we called it like, you know, whatever acronyms.
Because you look at it, I mean, I think that's always a battle of any business that has the name attached to the brand is that, you know, you're always attached to somebody's personal brand. And then hopefully that personal brand continues to have power in the market. If not, unfortunately, the brand goes down regardless if it has great products or not. So, you know, it was a kind of taking a chance that you guys did there. I guess I was just trying to understand, like, did you guys have any other names that you guys came up with at first?
No.
Or it was always Ronnie Coleman?
Yeah, it was always Ronnie Coleman, because at the time, you know, and even today, you know, his name is so large internationally. And, you know, for me, when I finally sat down and said, I'm going to commit to doing this, you know, and the funny part is I committed to doing that. When I quit BSN, I found out my wife was like 2 weeks pregnant. So that's always like one of those stories I'll carry with me for the rest of my life, because I'll never forget, you know, waking up and feeling like I was going to puke for like the whole year, up to the point where I need to make money so that I can feed my family now. Right. Yeah. But we just, when I dove into it, it was like, you know, we're going to stick to this plan of, it's going to be Ronnie's name. We're going to go after international markets, kind of low hanging fruit, so to speak. And, you know, a lot of the big domestic companies, they weren't really treating these international accounts with like a lot of, you know, care. It was kind of like the redheaded stepchild. It's like, oh, we're going to fill Europa's orders, and whatever's left, you can fill these guys, right? So I kind of noticed a trend happening with that. And I was like, hey, you know what? I'm going to make you number one. I'm going to give you full rate. And Ronnie and I will come over there and we'll do your show. We'll visit the stores ourselves. So we procured a lot of orders based off of that, you know, premise of Ronnie's going to come over, give us, you know, a couple $100,000 order, whatever, and we'll go over there. And, you know, like I told you before, we started the business with no money. It was like Ronnie had this PowerPoint presentation, and I said, look, this is our concept, our idea. Are you in? And if you're in, I need you to give me money now, and I'll get you your products in 8 weeks. And, you know, obviously I went to people that I've met and trusted and developed relationships with over my career. And, you know, it was funny, is like I got more money than I ever expected, you know, and then like I'll never forget being the excitement of getting the money, and then in like the pure like pressure of going, now I have to fucking deliver. Yeah. Like this guy just gave me $200,000, and like I have to come through. Yeah. When I said I was going to come through. And that's when I knew it was like a real thing, you know. And so I, you know, that's when it kind of like took off, but it was like focus on international. You know, I really felt like I needed the time to kind of sharpen the edges before I launched domestically, you know, because there's just a lot of like lawsuits and FDA requirements and stuff like that. And while I made sure to follow it through the first time, like there's just things that don't, you know, there's so many moving parts, right? Sure. So I wanted to kind of delay the launch and just kind of focus on international, and it took off.
You said late 2011 is when you first launched. Do you remember first, I guess that would be 2012, what was your guys' revenue that first year?
I remember. So 2011, we did 400,000.
And that was just
that was just from October.
Yeah, last quarter.
Yeah, it was just like from October, and that was only with 2 products. And then in 2012, we did $9 million
Yeah, so crazy.
So,
and this was
out of
only,
my house, in
and
my
this is
garage.
only
so-
international at this point. You didn't.
Yeah.
When did you guys launch domestically?
The last quarter of 2014, we it was with GNC was like when that happened. So there might have been some money coming from GNC at that time. It was just right. It would have been like a half and half. I don't know, but it was more or less like the last couple months of the year.
This is kind of makes it even a little bit more crazy to think about. In 2015, you guys were ranked in Inc. 500, and I think 209th or somewhere around there too.
Yeah,
somewhere around there with some crazy growth rate of 2,000+% over the first 3 years. But if you think about it, all of that revenue was international revenue, which in nutritional supplement, and you can even think about it even broader towards just general CPG outside of like major portfolio companies, the term multinational is not used correctly in the most sense. Like most of these big CPG brands do not sell a lot of their food, beverage, beauty, whatever overseas, just because there's just a lot of just red tape and everything. And it's very confusing for a lot of brands to get in there. But you guys dove like straight in.
Somebody told me, they're like, "You're born global." I'm like, what does that mean? They're like, "You're born global. You didn't even sell them. Your first customer was international, and you attacked a global market." So it's called "We're Born Global." Really, I mean that was at the time to me just seemed like the least path of resistance, honestly. And it certainly turned out to be, as I didn't know at the time, how difficult penetrating the domestic market with a celebrity brand was going to end up being. You know.
Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned a little bit about GNC, and GNC was kind of the key partner that you guys initially kind of went with the domestic launch. I mean, you guys kind of went exclusive.
Yeah, 3,000. It was huge launch.
Huge, all kind of national. And this is at the height of GNC's revenue. This is 2014, 15, 16 is when they kind of were at the paramount of their earnings, and unfortunately it didn't go as you planned. Correct?
No, definitely didn't. I always take everything as a learning experience. I think at the time, my initial reaction to GNC is I didn't want to do it, but there's also, the numbers are too big. It was like I wasn't ready to go domestically. They were, really hot and heavy about it. The purchase orders, millions of dollars. And it was kind of like I had to sit there and go, okay, well, this wasn't in my plan, but this is really big for me to turn this down. If I want to really accelerate the growth in this company, I think I might have to do this. And so ultimately I ended up kind of going against my intuition and doing it. We had a contract, the things that they were supposed to do, things that we were supposed to do. And, we took every penny that we made out of that deal and put it right back into it. I mean, we had a, $300,000 tour bus that we drove around to do appearances at the stores. The problem was that the GNC was so big that they weren't even the stores weren't even set up or promoting the appearances. So we're just walking into stores and there's nobody there. We're supposed to be on the eye level of a hard, shelf on the wall. We didn't get that. So we got beat up a little bit and it didn't work out. And so, we hung in for about a year or so. And then it seemed pretty evident that, as a growing company, that it was we maybe bit off more than we could chew.
I mean, we're talking at this point about, 2015 or so, or 15, 16. And in the last couple of years, the industry as a whole has changed a lot, and not only just with retailing, but just how brands are put together and brands are marketed and just a lot of different things. But what you guys have continuously been able to do is drive growth in one of the most kind of technical markets, international, and having to deal with also a lot of just changing regulatory, just different things that are not. I mean, and I'm not talking even domestic regulatory. Obviously, there's things going on as well, but just internationally, with just a lot of different things with trade.
So you have no control over.
Yeah, things
you have zero control over. The international business. I mean, look, it's like stocks. Trump gives a speech or whatever about something, not talking about politics, but markets react to those, to those decisions or those speeches. And so, you have a customer that, let's just say, it could be, Russia or whatever. something comes out or there's a trade policy that changes just slightly, well, their currency drops significantly. So let's say a guy's making 30 margin off my product, well, the currency just dropped 45. He's in freeze mode, right? Yeah. I mean, and this is a real thing. And this is a real thing that's happened all over. I mean, the Canadian dollar, the Australian dollar, when I started, the Australian dollar was stronger than the U.S. dollar. It was $1.10 Australia to the U.S. dollar. Now it's 60. It was like the lowest it got was like 60 something cents to the U.S. dollar. So it dropped. I mean, that's over 40%.
Yeah.
So, you know, that makes purchasing habits change awfully quick and hard. And so there's a lot of things that, you know, you have to constantly adjust to keep international sales going. And it can be difficult at times because it's a plus minus system. Like you're losing guys and you're adding guys and you're losing guys and you're adding guys. And it's just like, you just got to make sure you're on the positive side of adding things before, you know, with losing them, because there's just too many things that you can't control.
You guys have definitely continued to grow over these years, though people in maybe the United States have continued to not really see you guys much around. I mean, you know, does that hurt your feelings? Like, does that, I mean, I think a lot of people go out and they build a brand and you know, they get those excited moments when they go and see like maybe somebody wearing their shoes or wearing like, I mean, the problem with you guys selling, you know, 80+% of your product overseas is you don't get to see people carrying around a Ronnie Coleman Signature Series pre-workout in the gym.
Right.
Or, you know, I mean, does that kind of stuff, like, does it affect you?
Yeah,
does it
I mean,
not?
like, heck yeah, it hurts my feelings because I feel like, you know, we're a great company. We've been making great products from day one. I think we've taken everybody's, you know, interest to heart every time we do something. And I think that, you know, if we were given the proper chance, I'd be really, really pretty impressed with our products. At the same time, I just got to acknowledge it for what it is. I mean, we're Americans. I'm an American, you know, and we live in this little bubble where we think if it's not great here, it's everywhere. The world is bigger than the United States of America, you know, collectively. And I get a lot of, you know, funny enough, a lot of really cool messages when people go to other remote countries and like, dude, I'm in Ecuador and I can't. Your products are everywhere, you know, or I'm in Lithuania and like all I see is Ronnie Coleman products, or even in Southeast Asia, like Indonesia is covered in like what is going on, you know? And so I still get, you know, the fun out of that. But yeah, it does bother me, you know, but at the same time, like I get why they're skeptical. I mean, there've been other companies, there've been other bodybuilders that have come in here and, you know, they kind of squandered their chance, in my opinion, to do it right, and that brings you down, right? Because birds of a feather flock together, right? And so, it doesn't matter if I was the first like new age bodybuilder to do this. There's Gaspari before me did it awesome, and then there's a whole bunch of other bodybuilders after we launched that saw, hey, look how easy it is success, and then it didn't do much, didn't do anything at all, and so I think with those failures and lack of success with those brands, it kind of like throws some shade on us too. You know, it kind of makes us look like the category itself is a failure, right? Yeah. And so you now have like an additional, you know, obstacle to overcome with like, oh, well, it's a bodybuilder brand. It's like, what does that mean exactly? You know, like it's hardcore brand. Hardcore brands do great. They have done great, you know, throughout time. Well, you know, this line didn't do well, that line didn't do well. And so, you know, it just becomes one more, you know, like I said, obstacle in a list of things that you're going to domestically have to overcome, you know. So it's not very easy for sure.
It's been about 7 years that Ronnie Coleman Signature Series has been around.
Yeah.
And, you know, anybody that knows anything about business is that, you know, partnerships live or die by how well the partners kind of work together and kind of are able to complement each other. I mean, 7 years now, I mean, you know, statistically you guys are you know, breaking the mold of everything because, you know, businesses don't last this long and partnerships generally don't last this long. Why do you guys work so well? Like, why do you and Ronnie work well over like maybe other people that you've had in your life that have come and gone or whatever?
Yeah.
Like, why do you guys stick?
I mean, I've witnessed partnerships go south even when I was at BSN, you know. I cannot be Mr. Olympia. I cannot be, you know, win all these awards and do all these wonderful things that he's done. I can't sign the autograph for 8 hours, and I can't, you know, I think I look at Ronnie, he's a completely different skill set, and he works his ass off. So I respect that, right? And then he looks at me as like, okay, you know, you do the other things that you've learned in your career and done, and you do them well. And so I don't like question his approach, and he doesn't really question my approach. because there's really a fundamental like layer of trust that's really strong between us, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, there is. I mean, from day one, it was like he knew, and I knew, like, when you signed this agreement to work with me, like, he knew how much was at stake for himself. And I knew how much I had to, had to come through with it, because I felt that pressure of, like, okay, you're going to trust me with your name. That name, at that time, without a question, because it was a 5-year deal, I was a millionaire at that point in time, because he just sold, he just signed his name over to me to trust his name with something. And so, like, okay, I was like, all right, he put a lot in trust into me. And I have to reciprocate by, constantly updating, showing him the figures, the numbers, treating him like an owner, right? Because that's how he is an owner.
Yeah.
He's my partner. So I don't treat him like an ignorant athlete. Ronnie knows more about money than anybody will know. They always just look at him as like, oh, it's Ronnie. He's a dumb bodybuilder or whatever. But anybody that knows Ronnie, and even in the movie, they're like, you're crazy. He knows everything. He's very aware, so.
Yeah, and just, you touched on the movie. I mean, I guess to add to your point about how you guys trust each other fully on everything, I mean, but that movie was getting made and you didn't even really, ask to get it viewed first or anything. Like, you just trusted that the story of Ronnie was going to be portrayed correctly for the brand, because though maybe Ronnie Coleman and the brand Ronnie Coleman Signature Series are, very intertwined, they're also very separate in certain ways. And there could have been things that could have been said or portrayed, from the director, cutting things in that could have made Ronnie look a certain way or made your company look a certain way. But yet you just said, hey, Ronnie understands exactly how this needs to be put together, and I don't need to micromanage it.
I mean, the thing that people don't realize about Ronnie, it'll be his legacy with me, and we're going to hopefully live a long time. But what I would say, the things that people know about him is that, one, Ronnie is the most positive human being that I've ever encountered. So surgeries, this, that, he's like a cat that keeps falling back on his feet. He just lands on his feet and he's smiling. And he always seems to extract something good of a really shitty situation, So and it's funny because I'll have conversations, business talks with him. I'm like, dude, this is what's going on. I'm so stressed. And he's like, it'll be okay. Everything's going to be all right. And I'm like, dude, shut up. It's not going to be okay right now, right? I'm panicking. This is a bad situation. You need to worry a little bit more, Yeah. But he's always in a positive mindset that everything's going to be okay and that everything's going to work out. And another thing about him is that he just never says a bad thing about anybody. I've never heard him say oh, Jay sucks, or he about anybody. Someone will bash him and he'll be like, I don't understand why they said that. And you don't so he's always maintained this, level of positivity. And so, when talking about that movie came up, it was I don't see how you can portray somebody that's that positive in a negative light ever, because it's just not in him, right? Yeah. And, obviously I said, how did they come out? And it was, I hate watching myself on film, but I think it came out pretty good. And then me, I'm a, doc guy. I love watching documentaries, and I was blown away by how well it came out. And I think obviously the results that we're seeing with it, being number 1 on iTunes for so many weeks, and then just the positive feedback we're getting is that it's going to help further cement his legacy.
And I'll make sure that I link that movie when this goes live. So you guys, if you're interested in kind of what Brendan's talking about Ronnie and his story, and just kind of understanding how somebody can come from, I believe in, poor kid from Louisiana.
Oh man, poor as it gets. He didn't have shoes some summer.
And winning, 8 Mr. Olympias. Yeah. Some of them while he was actually even working a full-time job, which is, if you think about it now, in the sense of athletes and everything, they don't, have other jobs and things like that. So for him to have an actual full-time career and also win the most prestigious bodybuilding title in the world, it takes a certain type of person. So if anybody is into documentaries or anything like that, I suggest probably taking a look at it, because you're probably going to learn something, not just about, an interesting figure in the sport, but also just, an interesting figure in the world.
But to get back to really quick on Ronnie too, and the third thing is Ronnie, high school, did awesome, went to college, graduated with honors, also made the football team, Eddie Robinson, the winningest coach in football, NCAA football.
At Grambling?
Grambling State, right?
Yeah.
Played for him. Walk on, while working, then became a police officer, rookie of the year. I saw it a long time ago. This dude's just a winner.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, even with his kids and stuff, he's a phenomenal dad. Like, everything through and through, he just wins. He wants to win. So, I think that was a big thing too, because we're the same way, right? So it's like, I'm a winner, he's a winner, and we're like, okay, we're gonna, we got to go hustle and do this.
Sure. So, I mean, I guess transitioning, I mean, that's obviously in the now, right now we're talking about, and then, things are still going extremely well with your brand, but kind of what's next? I mean, what's kind of on the horizon, be it plans, projects, I mean, anything that you could kind of talk of that's not going to obviously give away any secrets.
Yeah. I mean, I think like, look, we're in a supplement industry and innovation is kind of like tough right now, right? Because there's just so many companies and so many brands. So I think, you have to kind of craft your own business and make, changes and things that can make you a better business that's not public, right? Like, you don't talk about like, oh, here's a press release, like I'm semi vertically integrated now, how cool, like nobody wants to know about that kind of stuff. But there's things that you can do to your business that make you stronger and better overall. And so for us, a lot of the things is, expanding into different areas that we feel are pretty cool. We talked about, the functional cosmetics and stuff like that. That's a big thing that we've been working on for a long time, is functional cosmetics for males. Like there's, anti-DHT shampoos and like tightening and toning creams. Tanning creams are becoming really popular as people become more educated on skin cancer and how prevalent it is and stuff like that. So we're wanting to expand in there. As far as the RCSS line goes, we're constantly dabbling in functional foods, for our sake. We're not this huge domestic company, so it doesn't make a huge splash, but I still like to be the first to do things, right? Sure. So, I mean, you even tried it yourself. We have, a hot cake that I've been working on for a long time. It's pretty good in the final stages. And then, we have, various other little things that we're kind of just toying with that we just think are fun. I think that's part of being a brand that's cool, is just sometimes doing things that are against the rules, so to speak. Not the FDA rules, but against the norm, right? And we do that a lot, and I think that we do that and have fun, and sometimes it's at a specific, objective to make amount of money, and sometimes it's just like because it's fun.
Is the continuation of strategy going to be international, or is it going to be inching back in domestically and kind of really putting some time, effort, and money behind building up that?
Yeah, I mean, international is always going to be the bread and butter, as you've seen our numbers and how it's constantly just a strong, our strong portion of our business. Domestic has just been flat for years for us. It hasn't gone down. It hasn't gone up. We've traded, you saw from, distribution everywhere to just one company. We've seen, the Amazon factor in play, and you've seen what we're doing with that and how we're playing our cards with, having a set of our products and actually under the exclusive category with Amazon, and that's growing pretty aggressively month over month. And then you have your own direct to consumer, business, which is something that we've been working on for several years, and that's growing too. So it's like, I think we're going to continue to inch our way domestically, no matter what. I try to be a man of like not putting good money at bad things, right? So I don't like to throw, good dollars at situations that seem to be, a little bit hesitant or not as receptive, right? To growing with money. So domestically, it's just a precaution, just being precautious at what you invest in and how you're trying to grow it, and also controlling your expectations, right? Because we have a very unique things happening right now domestically, right? The Amazon factor. You have, I think it was like Forbes or something came out with like the top 11 like retailers that are gonna possibly go out of business, and like 3 of them are like all
nutritional.
It's like Vitamin Shop, GNC, and like Vitamin World. It's like, okay, that's a good fucking sign. Like all 3 of the biggest retailers are gonna go out, and that's 60%, 70-80% of all the shops in the U.S. And so I think there's a lot of like cautious play, but I think the answer to it all is direct to consumers is is maintaining your own business, maintaining the voice of your brand with these people. You get to touch them, feel them. You're in control from the top, to the bottom of it. And so I think that, our efforts are going to be to, continue to grow that. And we have fun with that. We have fun communicating with the customer. And I think also, Amazon is a big role that you have to figure it out. And I think that we're trying to maintain a place with Amazon where we grow with them while not upsetting and, counteracting, different businesses that were growing also with, distribution, etc.
Obviously this was a extremely enjoyable episode. The thing that most people are going to get out of this obviously is that the brand, Ronnie kind of always seems to be, the front facing person of this. And
Sure,
it's nice to kind of hear from the person that's back there, kind of handling the day-to-day business and running this hyper successful nutritional supplement brand. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you want to help support me, make sure you guys hit that thumbs up button on this video. If this is the first time you've been introduced to my videos, would love for you guys to be a part of my community by subscribing to my channel. I upload several videos just like this weekly. And if you guys want to connect further outside of this platform, I do include all of my social media links down below. I just want to thank you guys again for your time. Hopefully I gave you some value in return, and we'll see you guys on the next video.